The VA has a lot of rules when it comes to rating certain disabilities and how to combine those ratings. Some of these rules you may not be aware of, but if you are aware of them, it could make the difference between the rating you have and the rating you want. Welcome to VA Made Easy. I'm VA-accredited attorney and U.S. Army combat veteran Ed Farmer. Today, we're going to discuss 5 rating rules that you may not know, but if you do know, it could mean the difference between that 90% and 100% or obtain the rating you want. If you need help with your claim, visit me at vetlawoffice.com. We provide zealous advocacy. We'll prep you for those CMP exams. We'll help you obtain medical nexus opinions. We'll help you obtain those buddy statements. There's no fee unless we win. Set up a free consultation at vetlawoffice.com or 1-800-700-4174. But for now, let's get into it. All right, 5 rating rules that everyone should know. So the first rule is the bilateral factor. Now, this is probably the most commonly known rule that I'm going to discuss, but I don't think a lot of veterans understand the way it actually operates. So let's get into the bilateral factor and the way it could change your rating. When you have a service-connected disability of both arms or both legs, the bilateral factor applies. Bilateral factor basically increases your combined rating by 10% in cases where both arms or both legs are affected by a service-connected disability. Let me give you an example so you better understand. Suppose you're service-connected for a left elbow at 30%, a right wrist condition at 10%, and then you have another condition, say tinnitus, rated at 10%. Bilateral conditions here are the left elbow and the right wrist because they affect both arms. So what you're going to do first is you're going to combine the ratings for the bilateral condition. So you're going to combine that 30% for the left elbow with the 10% for the right wrist, and you're going to get 37. You're then going to take 10% of that 37, which is 3.7, and you're going to round that up to 41. When you combine that 41 with the other 10% you have for tinnitus, that makes a total combined rating of 47. So let me explain why this is important. Without the bilateral factor, you would only be rated at 40%. With the bilateral factor, you've now increased your total rating to 50%. All right, rating rule number 2. The VA is required to assign the higher of the 2 evaluations. All right, so when there's a question of what evaluation should be assigned, the VA is required to assign the higher of the 2 evaluations. For instance, say you're trying to get service-connected for PTSD. The VA is trying to determine the rating. You're sort of in between 50 and 70%. You have some criteria for 50, you have some for 70. In scenarios like that, the VA should assign the 70% rating the higher of the 2 evaluations. If they don't assign that 70% rating, then they have to give an adequate statement of reasons and bases why they did not assign the higher rating. And the regulation for this rule can be found at 38 CFR 4.7. However, keep in mind, there are some exceptions to this rule. Now, the exceptions are somewhat complicated, so I'm not going to go into them on this video. But if the diagnostic code contains successive and cumulative criteria, such as in the rating criteria for migraines, then this rule does not apply. I suggest talking to your VA-accredited representative, discuss whether or not this rule applies in your instance. Rule number 3. The rule that the VA has to separate the effects of a service-connected condition from a non-service-connected condition. There are certain times when it's difficult to determine the effects of a service-connected condition from the effects of a non-service-connected condition. The VA must attempt to try to separate those symptoms. But if they are unable to determine what symptoms are caused from the service-connected condition and what symptoms are caused from the non-service-connected condition, then they must attribute all those symptoms to the service-connected condition. So for example, say, again, let's use PTSD as an example. So you have PTSD, but maybe you have some other non-service-connected conditions such as a substance abuse disorder or personality disorder. If the VA psychologist cannot separate what symptoms are being caused by your PTSD and what symptoms are being caused by your substance abuse or personality disorder, then they must attribute all those symptoms to the service-connected PTSD. Rule number 4, considering the effects of medication on your service-connected disabilities. There's a rule that says if the relief provided by medication is not addressed by the relevant diagnostic code for the service-connected condition you're trying to get rated, the VA cannot consider that in evaluating that disability. And this rule stems from the rule that it's legal error to consider factors outside of the rating criteria. So there's a case, Jones v. Shinseki, where the veteran, he was trying to get a 30% rating for irritable colon syndrome. The C&P examiner noted that medication helps relieve some of his symptoms, and the VA denied that increased rating, saying, well, your medication has relieved some of those symptoms, so you no longer qualify. Well, the Court of Appeals of Veterans Claims found that to be error because there's nothing in the diagnostic code for irritable colon syndrome that says you're allowed to consider the effects of medication or the symptoms that the medication relieves. Rating rule number 5, staged ratings. So separate ratings can be assigned for different periods of time based on the facts found. So assigning separate ratings for a distinct period of time, that's called staged ratings, and the VA is allowed to do that. Usually this comes up when you have a long appeal. So you filed the initial claim and you had to go to the Board of Veterans Appeals. It took several years and the condition changed since the time you filed the appeal, for better or for worse. In those instances, as long as the evidence supports it, the VA is allowed to assign a rating for a period of time and then either increase or lower that rating for another period of time. Just make sure that the VA is correct in doing that and that the evidence doesn't support that you should have had the same rating the entire time. And that does it. Those are the 5 rating rules that you may not know. I hope they're helpful. Keep liking, keep sharing, keep subscribing. And as always, you have the power to change your VA claim.